What if I told you that for the last 50 years almost everything the experts, the doctors, and the government have told you about diet and weight loss is fundamentally wrong? What if being overweight isn't a moral failing, a simple sin of gluttony and sloth? What if it has almost nothing to do with a lack of willpower or not trying hard enough at the gym? And what if the real culprit behind the modern obesity epidemic isn't the fat on your plate but the bread, the pasta, the potatoes, and the sugar? For decades, we've been handed a simple story about why we get fat. It's the story of calories in, calories out. You eat too much, and you move too little. It's a math problem. And if the math isn't working for you, well, that's your fault. It's a story that is simple, intuitive, and according to the investigative science journalist Gary Taubes, almost completely wrong. In his groundbreaking book, Why We Get Fat and What to Do About It, Taubes acts like a detective, meticulously investigating the history of nutrition science to uncover where we went so terribly wrong. The book is a powerful indictment of conventional wisdom and a compelling presentation of a new, or rather an old and forgotten hypothesis for why our bodies accumulate fat. This is not just another diet book. It is a profound philosophical argument that will change how you think about food, about health, and about your own body, forever. The crime scene, a flawed hypothesis. To understand Taubes' argument, you first have to understand the crime scene. The scene of the crime is the last half-century of nutritional advice, and the victim is our collective health. The primary suspect, the one that has been convicted in the court of public opinion for 50 years, is dietary fat. The theory of the crime is what Taubes calls the gluttony and sloth hypothesis, but what we all know as calories in, calories out. This model is based on the first law of thermodynamics. It states that energy cannot be created or destroyed, therefore if you take in more energy, calories from food, than you expend, calories burned through activity, your body will store the excess energy as fat. To lose weight, you must create a deficit. You must eat less or move more or both. It's seductively simple, and it leads to a very clear moral conclusion. If you're overweight, you are either lazy, gluttonous, or both. This idea became official dogma in the 1970s. Spurred on by some flawed but influential scientific studies that linked dietary fat to heart disease, the government and major health organizations began a massive public health campaign urging Americans to adopt a low-fat, high-carbohydrate diet. Fat was declared the enemy. We were told to trim the fat from our steaks, switch to skim milk, and replace butter with margarine. The food industry happily complied, flooding the grocery stores with thousands of new, low-fat products. The only problem was, to make these low-fat products taste good, they had to add something else. Sugar. So what happened? Did we all get healthier? No. The exact opposite happened. The obesity and type 2 diabetes epidemics exploded. We, as a society, followed the advice. We ate less fat, and we ate more carbohydrates. And we got fatter and sicker than ever before. For Taubes, this is the first clue that the investigators got the story completely wrong. The conventional wisdom simply does not fit the evidence. He argues that we have been confusing the symptom with the cause. Overeating doesn't make you fat. The process of getting fat, he argues, is what makes you overeat. This is a radical, mind-bending idea, and to understand it, we need to meet the real prime suspect. The central argument of why we get fat is that obesity is not an energy balance disorder, it is a hormonal disorder. It's a disease of dysregulation. And the master hormone that regulates fat storage in the human body is insulin. This is the core of the science, and it's incredibly important. When you eat, your body breaks down the food into its component parts. When you eat protein, it's broken down into amino acids. When you eat fat, it's broken down into fatty acids. And when you eat carbohydrates, they are broken down into glucose or sugar. This glucose enters your bloodstream. Your body, being a finely tuned machine, doesn't like having too much sugar in the blood, so your pancreas releases insulin. Insulin is like the master traffic cop of your metabolism. Its primary job is to get that sugar out of your blood and into your cells to be used for energy. But it has another equally critical job. Insulin is the principal fat storage hormone. When insulin levels are high, it sends a loud and clear signal to your fat cells. Stop burning fat for energy and start storing as much fat as you possibly can. It's like a one-way valve. High insulin pushes energy into your fat cells and simultaneously locks the door, preventing that fat from getting back out to be used as fuel. This is the absolute key to the entire book. You cannot effectively burn your own stored body fat when your insulin levels are high. It is biologically impossible. The switch is turned to store fat mode, and the burn fat switch is turned off. So the next logical question is, what makes insulin go up the most? The answer is unequivocal: carbohydrates. Dietary fat has a very minimal effect on insulin. Protein has a moderate effect, but carbohydrates, especially refined ones like sugar, flour, and starches, cause a rapid and massive spike in insulin. So when you eat a meal high in refined carbohydrates, like a bowl of pasta or a sandwich on white bread or a sugary soda, you are sending a powerful hormonal signal to your body to stop burning fat and start storing it, right now. With insulin identified as the prime suspect, Taubes builds his case by examining the evidence against its main accomplice: refined carbohydrates. He argues that the reason we get fat is because the modern Western diet, which is overwhelmingly based on sugar and easily digestible starches, keeps our insulin levels chronically elevated. Here's how the vicious cycle works. You eat a carbohydrate-rich meal, say, a bowl of cereal for breakfast. Your blood sugar spikes. Your pancreas releases a flood of insulin to deal with the sugar. The insulin does its job, pushing all that energy into your cells. Some of it gets stored as glycogen in your muscles and liver, but those stores are small and fill up quickly. The rest of the excess energy, under the command of insulin, gets converted into fat and stored in your fat cells. Because the insulin response to refined carbs is so strong and fast, it often overshoots, causing your blood sugar to crash a few hours later. This crash is what we experience as that mid-morning slump, that feeling of being tired, foggy, and suddenly ravenous again. So what do? You reach for another quick hit of carbs like a bagel or a granola bar, and the whole cycle starts over again. Spike, crash, crave, repeat. This cycle explains why the calories in, calories out model is so cruel. It's not that you lack willpower, it's that the food you are eating is hormonally programming you to be hungry and to store fat. You are in a biological trap. Because your insulin is always high, your body can't access its own stored fat for energy. So even if you have tens of thousands of calories of stored energy on your body, your brain thinks it's starving. So it makes you hungry, and it makes you tired to conserve energy. The hormonal state of getting fat is what causes the behavior of overeating and sloth, not the other way around. Taubes presents compelling historical evidence for this. He looks at populations around the world that were studied by anthropologists in the early 20th century. These populations, from the Inuit eating a high-fat diet of seal and fish, to Pacific Islanders eating a high-carb diet of root vegetables, were almost entirely free of the diseases of civilization like obesity, diabetes, and heart disease. The one thing they all had in common was the absence of refined carbohydrates and sugar in their diets. But in every single case, when these populations were introduced to the Western diet of flour, sugar, and processed foods, they were ravaged by these diseases within a generation. The evidence, he argues, is overwhelming. It's not about how much you eat, it's about what you eat. Exonerating an innocent victim, the truth about fat. If carbohydrates are the true villain, then that means dietary fat, the suspect we've had locked up for 50 years, is innocent. This is one of the most radical and important parts of Taubes' investigation. Taubes argues that this story is based on bad science and a fundamental misunderstanding of human metabolism. The biological reality is that dietary fat has a minimal effect on insulin. When you eat a meal of fat and protein like eggs and bacon, your insulin levels remain low and stable. And what happens when insulin is low? The burn fat switch is turned on. Your body is free to access its own stored body fat for energy. Furthermore, fat is incredibly satiating. It keeps you feeling full for a long time, naturally reducing your overall calorie intake without you having to consciously count or restrict. A high-fat, low-carbohydrate diet breaks the vicious cycle of spike, crash, and crave. It keeps your blood sugar stable, your insulin low, and your energy levels consistent, all while allowing your body to finally burn its own fat for fuel. The idea that dietary fat causes heart disease is also a myth that Taubes dismantles. He points out that for most of human history we ate diets much higher in animal fats, and heart disease was extremely rare. The epidemic of heart disease only began in the 20th century, at the same time that our consumption of sugar and refined carbohydrates skyrocketed. It's a case of mistaken identity. We blamed the fat that was found at the scene of the crime in our arteries, without realizing that it was the sugar and refined carbs that were causing the underlying damage in the first place. The verdict and the solution. After presenting all the evidence, Taubes arrives at his final verdict. The reason we get fat is not because we eat too much, it is because the carbohydrates we eat make our bodies hormonally programmed to store fat. If the problem is hormonal, then the solution must also be hormonal. The path to a healthy weight and a healthy metabolism is not about starving yourself or spending hours on a treadmill to burn off the calories from a piece of cake. It is about controlling insulin. And the way to control insulin is to restrict the foods that stimulate it the most: refined carbohydrates, starches, and sugars. The practical application of this philosophy is a low-carbohydrate diet. This means eliminating or drastically reducing things like sugar, bread, pasta, rice, potatoes, and sugary drinks. And it means replacing those foods with foods that do not spike insulin, things like meat, fish, eggs, leafy green vegetables, and healthy fats like avocados, olive oil, and butter. This isn't just a diet for weight loss, it is a diet for hormonal health. By keeping insulin low, you not only allow your body to burn fat, you also reduce your risk of a whole host of modern diseases, from type 2 diabetes and heart disease to Alzheimer's and even some cancers. The final message of why we get fat is one of profound empowerment. If you have struggled with your weight your entire life, it is not your fault. You have not been fighting a battle against your own lack of willpower. You have been fighting a biological battle against your own hormones, armed with a completely flawed map. Gary Taubes provides a new map, one that is based on real science and history. It's a map that frees you from the cycle of blame and guilt and gives you a clear, logical, and effective path to reclaiming your health. It is a powerful call to question the conventional wisdom and to think critically about the advice we are given. It's an inquiry into the truth. If that's an inquiry you are on, you are in the right place. Welcome to Geeky Philosopher. Subscribe, and let's continue to seek the truth together.